Good morning, everybody. This is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here at NBC Charlotte, North Carolina. Here's the latest on Sandy. I wanted to do this update to focus on the mountains and the foothills and into areas of the western Virginias as well, but I did want to focus first on what's happening currently with Sandy. Pretty impressive storm. The big concern for everybody up and down the East Coast is just the size of this storm. You can see when you start looking at the width and the depth of this storm, it's just huge. It has a huge area of coverage. The big concern for the East Coast, no matter how strong this storm is, you may think it's only a Cat 1 or a strong tropical storm. It's this long fetch or duration of onshore winds, which is continuing to pile up water. So after every high tide comes in for the next 3 days, the water just doesn't go out. So that means the next high tide, the water just gets higher and higher. And the biggest concern for me is I hope the people in New York are ready for a record-breaking storm surge, because with this onshore flow pushing that water in there, and then Long Island acting as a funnel and the Jersey Shore acting like a funnel, this area around New York is going to see a record-breaking flood. So that's going to be the big story on the coast. Inland, it's going to be about a huge wind event. We're worried about damaging winds up and down pretty much all of the eastern seaboard. We could see damaging wind gusts all in this area that would bring down tree branches and just about anything else that's not nailed to the ground. You can see we've already got the cold front back to the west. I'll turn the radar on. We've got some precipitation along the front, and we've got some very cold temperatures not too far away. They're still up here in the Midwest, but this cold air is going to be drawn in or pulled in on the backside, and it's going to head actually below the storm. As the storm goes up in here, the coldest air is going to wrap around the south side, so it actually could be colder down in here as the storm makes landfall than it's going to be up in here initially, which means down in the North Carolina mountains, we're talking about some very significant snow. In fact, let's start looking at some of the model data for the North Carolina mountains. The first model we're going to look at is the NAM4. It's a high-resolution model. I'm just getting some new data in, but just through tomorrow early, this is just through tomorrow early, you can see the snowfall totals it starts to put out. I'll zoom in closer here, and look what's going on in the Smoky Mountains, at least with the NAM4. These totals right in here are above a foot. Anything white or above is a foot to 16 inches. You can see back into the northern mountains and central mountains of North Carolina, we're probably talking about maybe 1 to 2 in a couple spots around 3 to 4 inches of snow. But let's switch to the NAM model, which is the other version of NAM. It's a lower resolution, excuse me, but it actually goes out a little bit further into the future, and we'll go out all the way through this duration of the storm, all the way through Halloween morning. This would be about Halloween morning right here. If you look at this, this is basically the amount of snow we predicted from the NAM model, kind of hitting the Smokies, same amount over a foot, and then you look right along the Tennessee line, and this is going to be very elevation dependent as we get into above 3,000 feet. Really looks to be the way to go. And then up into West Virginia, this is just silly snow. If you look in here, all this dark area, this is basically everything you see in that dark shade is above 20 inches. So that's a huge area of 20 inches plus. And embedded in this area, there's some 20 to 30 inches of snow in this area. So just an amazing amount of snow that's going to fall in these areas. So what's going on with HPC? They've got a pretty broad area of 4-inch snowfall painted there. Anything that red's a 70% chance that you're going to see 4 inches. That does extend into Watauga and Ashe County, but pretty much includes all of basically West Virginia. The modeling, people are often like, well, how is this going to happen? Well, when you look at how the storm's going to unfold, the interesting thing I see on these the eastern pages here of the GFS is where you see where the low is. It goes into parts of basically Pennsylvania. You've got the polar jet wrapping in all the way from Hudson Bay, coming straight down on the backside, coming over the Great Lakes, picking up moisture from that warm water, and then the northwest flow into the mountains. So you've got the combination of a synoptic storm, which is just your typical low pressure. You've got lake enhancement, and you have orographic lift or northwest flow. You've got the absolute perfect combination for heavy, heavy snow. And when you start looking at the thicknesses or the temperatures, typically you would have snow if we had this dark blue line, which is we call the 540 line or the 0-degree line, you're actually even colder than that. You're down here well below 0 Celsius, especially just off the surface. So this is extremely cold air on the back side that's going to spin in. And if you look over time, we go out into the future here, the storm just continues to pump in that northwest flow into the mountains all the way through Wednesday. And even on Wednesday, it starts to relax a little bit as the wind becomes more out of the west. So there's a 3-day period here where we're going to see huge amounts of snow. And speaking of the cold, here's a look at the NAM4 temperatures. You can see on Monday it starts getting cold, but look at the temperatures in the mountains as we go into Monday afternoon, Monday night, and then especially Tuesday. Tuesday is probably going to be the peak of this storm as these super cold temperatures move into the mountains of 20s and 30s. So this stuff is going to stick, especially to trees, and could actually really pile up. How much snow are we talking about? This is the same model, the NAM4 model I showed you earlier. This goes out to 60 hours, and this will give you a good idea of just how much snow we're talking about. There's your panel right there. These reds to browns, 10 inches to 20 inches, and you can see a lot of that, especially higher elevations, and then obviously the ridiculous snow up in West Virginia. So for the North Carolina mountains, the thing you got to know, if you live at higher elevations, anything above 3,000 feet, you're talking heavy wet snow. And even at the lower elevations, it may not be as heavy. It's still going to be a huge issue coupled with the strong winds. And that's the other part of this storm that's going to be a big issue as well. Here's the future radar. Shows the precipitation rotating around. And look at all that precipitation coming into the North Carolina mountains and really beginning to pile up. One thing I don't think we can underplay at all is the wind speeds. There's high wind warnings up for the North Carolina mountains, and if you look at some of these wind speeds, you're looking at anywhere between, I would say, 30 to 40 mile per hour sustained winds and gusts above 60 and maybe even close to 80 at the mountaintops. So the combination of the strong winds and the heavy snow in the mountains could have crippling impacts on the power grid. So that's the big concern in the mountains. You've got about 24 hours to prepare still, if you haven't already, for areas in the North Carolina mountains up into the Virginias. We're very concerned about the wind and surge on the coast, but for our area in particular, if you live in these areas, especially the higher elevations from southwest Pennsylvania down into southwestern North Carolina, prepare to be without power for maybe days and very cold temperatures. So you need to have a reliable heat source. You need to have food and water for 3 days. And on top of that, the higher elevations will end up with maybe a foot of snow. So this is going to be one of the biggest storms this area has seen probably since 1993 as far as wind and snow. It may not be as widespread with the snow, but the wind just by itself could be huge. So go ahead, prepare today. You've got another 24 hours. It really starts tomorrow, but the worst of this is going to be on Tuesday. I'll keep things up to date online as much as I can at WCNC.com, on TV if you watch NBC Charlotte. If you can't pick us up, go to our website or follow me on Facebook or Twitter, WXBrad on Twitter and Brad Panovich on Facebook. I'll try to post another update tonight as things change, but winter storm watches are up already and high wind warnings. That should be enough warning for you. Go ahead, prepare today before the worst arrives.